It's the room tone dance. We're
I
doing
can't
a
get I
room.
can't get room tone if you're talking.
I know, I know. I get too excited, Chris. Hey,
No, we're good.
everybody. We're live. How's it going? This is Why We Roll, the tabletop role playing game design show from Stillfleet Studio with Christopher Pickett
Hey, that's me. What's up?
and myself, Wythe Marschall. And we're here with a very special guest today. We've actually invited on last season, and then just scheduling wise, we all got really busy in the fall. But we're very excited to be chatting now with more games. They make a lot of games, so more games are out and coming out. So, Tanya Floaker, hello.
Oh,
Thank you so much for making time.
no, thank you for having me on. It's amazing.
No, of course.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we're both really excited to chat today. Like White said, Tanya's worked on a lot of different projects, a lot of different games. You got some new stuff, I believe, coming to Kickstarter soon, which is very exciting. But before we jump into that, for folks who don't know you, don't know your work already, who's Tanya Floker? Where are you coming from? What are you into?
So, I'm a game designer based out of Edinburgh in Scotland. And so, my games, although they look like they cover a lot of different subject matter, I like to think they all deal with sort of issues of connection and disconnection between people and social themes around that. Uh, my first published game was called Be Seeing You. It was a game about uh, independence, control, surveillance state, infrastructure. It sort of riffed on the old Prisoner TV show, but also other dystopian themes and sort of brought it up to date for your table. And since then, I think I've released about a half dozen different games under my own Steam, and that range from sort of surrealist science fiction to grim dark, over the top, uh, like dramatic war game slash role play games, through to kitchen sink drama about people who care for kids. So a wide range of things, but all talking about connection and disconnection in some way.
Yeah, I know your work from Lo Thy Dread Empire, so I know it's only
Mm.
one of like a dozen projects you've done, but I'm curious to talk about that. The name
Mm.
alone, I have to say, it stopped me in my doom scroll of
It's very
wishing
good.
I was rich enough to just back blindly every indie TTRPG, but having to
Yeah.
at some point have some reason, even if it's like I know this person or just cool title, let me click through.
So
So that was my
yeah.
initial entree to your work. But then I'm a fan of Chums. I just got in the
Uh-huh.
mail, and then I just
Oh,
saw Thunder
magic.
Perfect Mind, which
Mm.
is there. These are very different games. So I like what you said about
Yeah,
connection.
yeah, they are.
Yeah, and having that through line. But maybe as we
Mm.
go, you can sometimes pause and go into one of the games, and maybe we can over time
Mm-hmm.
let listeners know both about your back catalog, but then also
Mm-hmm.
leading into Thunder Perfect Mind, how these are all exploring different themes that are still in the same world or building on things you're interested in basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
Before we get there, though, and maybe this
Mm.
can lead into it, I mean, I'm sure it will. We usually ask, basically, how did you get into games overall? And you could take that
Mm.
in any direction, playing them, writing them. Eventually, we do want to know about designing them. But what were
Yeah.
the first games you were playing, and what led you to eventually publish your own games?
Yeah. So I started out in terms of more formalized roleplay games. Uh, that came about. I'd been when I was quite young, like 7, 8, 9. I'd been doing fighting fantasy solo books, the choose your own adventure
Nice.
style. You know, go
Hell
to
yeah.
page 400 win. um, so like I got into those really young, and I was like really into them from a young age. And then my cousin, who was sort of an older cousin, who was into sort of war games and Blood Bowl and like Dungeons and Dragonsy stuff, got hold of Advanced Fighting Fantasy Dungeoneer, which is sort of like the multiplayer fighting fantasy system. And it just one holiday we were at my granny's, in her bedroom, just goofing about, took out this book, and he ran, like, just my cousin and me, there's no one else, but just ran a sort of mini adventure where I died. um Yeah, happens.
Of course.
Yeah, happens. Um, but I was hooked. And so I borrowed my cousin's copy of Dungeoneer a few weeks later. I got in a lot of trouble for writing in the character sheet in the book and sort of like dog earing it and get yeah. It's like I
That's
was young. I was young.
that's classic. That's so good. I mean, how could you not? I mean, it feels like a thing that you should write in, like all of the fighting fantasy books. But yeah, especially, Dungeoneer, it's like, yeah, you got to keep your character sheet. What are you going to use scrap paper? That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I think my cousin was rightly annoyed. And but carried on. I got my own copies. I think for the Christmas that year, I also got the Black Sand sort of supplement for it, and then I tried to run it at my primary school with some friends, and it didn't really work because even though I'd done it once with my cousin, I didn't really know what I was doing. But then by the time I hit high school, I sort of was just there was a high school games club, got involved there. I was also very much into Games Workshop stuff because I'm in the UK. They were the huge thing. That's where what you could see. So I got into like Warhammer Fantasy Battle, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, 40k, Blood Bowl, all that sort of classic game lines that they sort of had at the time, and it just carried on from there. I almost right away was making my own games because it just felt like what you do, and I was playing all different games. I was trying out different games, and there was the whole '90s sort of boom in terms of sort of White Wolf stuff coming out. Steve Jackson Games had like a whole bunch of stuff coming out, like in Nominee and about a dozen other lines of games. There was Shadowrun, Dawn, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness, D&D, just everything. Whatever I could play, I'd try it. And I've hopefully kept that little part of me's always been there. Like it isn't looking for novelty, but I want a game that does a thing. I want it to have a certain flavor, and I think starting with Advanced Fighting Fantasy, starting with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I think that lent itself to that sort of way of looking at things, not closing down the possibilities. And so yeah, eventually, I made the decision that I wanted to publish some of my designs. Um, I've already been doing fanzine stuff and club zines and that sort of thing, and I had a sort of background in doing zine distribution stuff, and it just seemed like the next thing to do. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, I can see that feeling like a very natural transition if you're already in the DIY scene, if you're already making zines and kind of distributing them. It's why not? Why wouldn't you just take this thing
Yeah,
that you've made and put it out into the world if you already have those kind of, resources and networks there? That's very
yeah.
exciting. I love when people bring up fighting fantasy specifically because for me as an illustrator, I really love the work of
Mm.
Russ
Nicholson.
Nicholson,
Yep.
one of the OG like pen and ink fighting fantasy artists, which like I don't know has like more of like a refinement to it than early D&D stuff, and it like feels a little bit more Games Workshopy, a little bit more detail oriented. But I remember finding those books as an adult, not as a kid because I'm in the United States, but playing through them and like genuinely having a great time in
Mm.
2020 when I couldn't go to people's houses to play games.
Yeah, absolutely, and they hold up. They
Yeah.
really do.
They
Yeah,
do, yeah,
I've
they're
never
solid.
played through. I remember the Steve Jackson fighting fantasy books. I never really had them as a kid, like you said, Chris. They weren't as big for me, but D&D was. But when I
Yeah.
was a little kid and first got my older brother's D&D books, no one would play with me except my brother is much older, and so my friends in elementary school and like middle school didn't want to play. So I think I invented in my own way like a shittier version of doing a fighting fantasy experience where you just have like D&D 1 and you're like trying to do it yourself at the lunch table, and that was kind of the same I think like vibe of like I don't know, like then the thing has to happen and do I hit it? I don't know, I don't really know what I'm doing, but it says I have 15 strength, so yeah, sure, I bash that thing. But I think so much of the mystery at that age is just discovering the forms and the sort of like weird logic, the procedures. Like there's a whole art to the proceduralism that's very different than a video game or reading a novel. So I do think there's something interesting, whether it's choose your own adventure, fighting fantasy, D&D, they're kind of on a spectrum there. But so Tanya, could you tell us, so what was, do you remember what was your first game, or like what was the first thing you did that felt, not a fanzine or something, but like your own sort of procedure, your own world?
Um, I guess in terms of like going out into sort of the public sphere, it would have been BC New. Like I've mentioned it already. It was the first game that I sort of went, this is a game I'm publishing under my own steam. Here it goes. I'd already designed a lot of other games, and in fact, a lot of the games that I've published since were designed like over a decade before Be Seeing You was published. So it's an unusual sort of back and forth. It's very rare for me to get rid of an idea. I'll put it on a hard drive somewhere, I'll bung it online somewhere, I'll have it in a notebook, and it'll come back and forth. You mentioned Lo Thy Dread Empire. That was sort of went through like 3-4 different iterations in my mind, and I still feel like it's got another one to come. Maybe not as Lo Thy Dread Empire, maybe as part of another game. But there's sort of ideas in my mind about what I want to do with the sort of mechanics, the feel, the emotional, the way in which the emotional pull of a game works. Sometimes that would work in another setting. So yeah, I don't put things aside, but I've got and a lot of the ideas I've got come from that sort of long-term iteration cycle, and banging my head on the wall with one version that just didn't work, and then ignoring it for a time, and then coming back to it and saying, oh, maybe if I do it this way or that way. Yeah.
Can you give us, just as an example, like with Lo Thy Dread Empire, some of the development that happened there? So it's
Sure.
you I think it's marketed, if I recall correctly, as anti-capitalist. So I'm also curious about that aspect. But as you said, I mean, I find this sometimes with rules, you come up with a cool idea and it later fits better to a different context, a different setting, different world, or you change the key name, you change the name of one of the factions or character classes. So, maybe if you can walk us through sort of how you went
Yeah.
about that game, just as an
Yeah.
example of your
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a whole lot of things. It's hard, sometimes difficult to, unless I'm doing a direct hack of something, it's hard to just sort of go, this is my influences. But at the same time, there are some things that are more influential than others, and I can draw from. So I talked about that early Games Workshop sort of influence, and I was very much more involved in like a narrative style of game with my friends. We sort of would play games that had a story, and then Blood Bowl, you'd have the league system, and then Necromunda came out, and it was very narrative focused as well. And there were non-Games Workshop war games that were far more narrative and about setting up a scenario and playing through. And so that married with the this sheer joy of reading battle reports in White Dwarf magazine. Okay, that you'd open up a magazine, a monthly magazine, okay, and there would be maps and turn-by-turn action, and
Oh yeah.
and it wasn't just like I rolled 6 dice, da da da. Sometimes it would say how many dice were rolled, but only when it was adding to the drama or adding to the sort of like
Right.
the emotion of the actual writing. It was it was a way of delivering narrative about the game. And so that stuck in my heart, that this is about the narrative of the war game, the narrative of the sort of piece. If you go back and read any of those ones in the 90s, you'll pick it up immediately. The style changes over the years. Like sometimes it goes more towards demoing the rules, sometimes more towards talking about it as if it were a piece of fiction. But all the way through, it's got emotion, it's got up swings and roundabouts, ups and downs, and you follow, like, everyone knows Jervis is going to lose because he always loses, but this one he doesn't. That kind of That kind of sort of like it's almost like wrestling or any other sort of
Yeah, yeah,
competitive narrative. Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
I
and
mean,
so
something
I'll
I
go,
think
Chris.
about a lot is in the last time that I picked up Warhammer 40,000, which was like 12 years ago,
Yeah.
something like that. It was like the sixth or seventh edition. I don't even know. But my friends and I, who I played with in Philly, we would always joke about forge a narrative because they would have these call out sections in the rule book where it would say in all caps, forge a narrative. And then it would like walk you through how you can take these like very technical mechanics and like very crunchy at the table scenarios, but then like, oh no, but this is a part of this battle. It's a part of this war, this series of battles, and like finding a way to narrativize it. So I think, yeah, even like kind of their mainline products, they have this tendency to like want to steer you into role play, even if that's not
Mm,
really mechanically what's happening at the table, which is
mm.
interesting.
Which, and
So
I will
yeah.
credit them
Oh,
because Tanya, I had a similar thing not being in UK and not getting that into the wargaming side, but reading some of the literature before the internet, before you could go down a Wikipedia
mm,
rabbit hole about Codex Astartes or whatever, what some space marine had for breakfast on the day he switched to chaos. But basically there was lore, and it was. I remember in high school when they came out with the like bigger format skirmish game Inquisition, and also
yeah,
finding
yeah.
out that they already had role playing games, which I was into
Hmm.
RPGs and I never knew, and so I was like amazed because I thought of them as this kind of stodgy, the guys at the war gaming store
Mm,
arguing about
mm,
sightlines, but it's like, oh
hmm.
no, it is narrative, and you can actually go back and forth from the level of my character is this tall to my character is this tall to my I'm doing role playing and it's in my mind, and you
Hmm.
there isn't right or wrong, and that was actually kind of an aha moment where I felt more free to say, well, I do kind of like video games, I do kind of like skirmish games, I prefer role playing generally if left to my own devices, but they're all fun, and it's been helpful over the years. I remember talking to Spencer Campbell about that too, that sometimes you do want to play a board game within a role playing experience because it has rules, you want to win or lose, and then you could go back to freeform making shit up, and again, it isn't good or bad, you should just know as a designer, okay, what gear am I like in? So I do think Games Workshop sort of.
Did we lose wife?
I
Yeah.
think you lost me, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Next question. Next question. Chris, do you have a question for Tanya, or
Oh,
Tanya, do you have a?
I was going
Yeah.
to carry on a little bit because
Well, yeah,
as well as
I think Tanya had more
yeah,
about
as,
narrative wargaming to get
yeah.
into.
So as well as that sort of those early memories of these battle reports, there was also a discussion at one point on the old story games forum, and so this discussion posited that it was just like a thought experiment type fun post. Okay, it was just for fun conversation. It's like there's this line of thought that says that D&D is derived from war games. D&D has got this direct lineage to the war games that preceded it. Therefore, like roleplay gaming has, at least traditional roleplay gaming has developed from the family tree of the war game. Okay, there's also an argument made by a certain segment of the gaming community, which in the early 2000s at that time were quite hostile, saying that story games aren't role play games. They're something else. Keep them away. They're girly. Don't look at them. Uh, it's funny how those people have all ended up on the wrong side of history at the moment. But what we're seeing now is the idea at the time was like, well, if this is a separate thing, and we sort of assume that it had to come back down the family tree. There was a war game that was the inception point for story games. What would a story gamed war game look like? And so there's this back and forth about, well, what would it look like? It would be more narrative. It would have, and the different ideas posited. And some people made games like very quick games, and I played about with something just at home. I don't think I even posted it, but I had this idea that you do away with measurements, you do away with uh, you might not even need models, although you could use them. It'd be optional. You could just draw maps, and it would be about the narrative of the battle. It'd be the sort of battle narratives would be the focus. And so that bubbled away, and I tried to make a skirmish game using it for that went. I ran a LARP festival for a short time. And I tried to use the background from that, and and it reappeared as something else another time. It reappeared in another tabletop game that I ran, and then to do with the COVID pandemic, I was having a lot of, I guess, there were just these two different poles sitting within me. One of them was seeing mutual aid groups and watching the facade of what's needed to keep society running, like drop almost. It's like who are the essential workers? We suddenly can see very clearly what work is essential and what work isn't essential, or what work could be scaled down, or what work could be got rid of. You know, and that's sort of like I come from a sort of, I'd say my politics come from an anarchist communist tradition, sort of Kropotkin, Emma Goldman, those types. Anyway, seeing that and seeing that in my lifetime, that critique of work and the ideology of work and the setup of society kind of is getting proven correct. We can see it in the moment. And so that was interesting, and seeing the way in which people in a disaster situation were coming together and were looking out for one another, and felt like there was an emotional want to help one another, to help humanity. And then the flip side of that was the sort of imposition of like the sort of idea that there was going to be this new normal, that things are going to change, but nothing did. The people who were saying that were very quick to, you've got to get back to work. Here in Britain, they were like incentivizing people to go to restaurants in the middle of the pandemic during some of the worst parts of it. They were trying to they were like, there's still like the idea of sort of, if we adopted a more nuanced position about masking, in the sense, and air purification, in the sense of like we had a more broad approach to it, means that we could do less of it now. But because that isn't in place, it means that it's an all or nothing kind of affair. It isn't thinking about like disability justice or about the health of youngsters coming up. And so I felt like there was a despondence there, and a disconnection, and a cynicism that was being instilled. It was being sort of like encouraged in people by the sort of hegemonic powers that be. So like the state and sort of just the function of capital. So yes, I had this sort of like just constant. There was this constant sort of dread in the air. There was this constant like capitalism is a death cult sort of dripping around us. There was this idea of effectively the sort of the way in which it breaks down social bonds that seem to sort of come from the sociality of people. Like, people wanted to reach out and help one another. People were going out in the street and banging pots and pans for healthcare workers initially because it was a spontaneous show of gratitude, and for refuse collectors, and for folks keeping the lights going, the folks that had to do that work, even though we didn't know what was happening, and it seemed a dangerous time. And while that was happening, pollution levels were dropping because transport wasn't as important, and some people were able to find they had more time to think about themselves and their place in the world. And so yeah, these two poles were sort of pulling back and forth, the connection, the disconnection of it all. And a lot of my frustrations and despondence and negative feeling got poured into this game. It got like the way that the sort of over the topness, the sort of grim darkness, which also leans back on that sort of John Blanche Games Workshop grand sort of horridness, the grand horror of it all.
Grand horror is a good way to put it.
Yeah. So yeah, and it got poured into this game. The game is it's a war game. Why is it a war game? Because it's talking about battle, it's talking about conflict, it's talking about the disconnection of society, it's talking about when society rips apart. And it's doing it in such a sort of like, because it's so blatant and so grandiose and all around us, I kind of wanted to push the game to that level. So that's thanks to like Julia Navalian, who does the art. It's a lot to do with her and her side of it. Like, we are co-creators in that endeavor. We both have our name on the cover, and she deserves every part of the credit when it comes to like just taking my ideas and what I'm saying. And her art brief was just like looking at the game that I wrote, and then she could do whatever she wanted with it. She would occasionally come and ask me questions, but I found out things about the game I'd created from her art. Like, the first piece of art she did specifically for the game had I sort of opened up the file. It's this beautiful. It's got like this zombie revenant black block, like with shields and spears all lined up against this huge prison fortress that are sort of crust punk zombies flinging themselves against like these undead cops. It's like there's this huge sort of like it's this very John Blanche, huge as crows flocking in the sky above. It's like, yeah. And then in center piece of the battle line, sort of in the background but huge in the frame, is a giant. This huge giant with some sort of rock chained on its back, and it's lumbering along. And I was just like, holy fuck. I had no idea my game had giants in it. I had no idea at that point. Before I opened that file, they'd not been mentioned. And I was just like, Julia, this is amazing. I had no idea these were here. And Julia's like, I just felt it. It just felt like this should be something colossal in amongst it. And I was like, okay, and I was like, what's this huge sort of chained floating rock thing on its back? And Julia just went, I don't know. And we just talked about it.
That's your job, you know?
No, that's both of us talking. No, but we came up with like this idea of, like, yeah, we came up with it all, and this happened back and forth through the whole project, and so, yeah.
And that was something where like you went back into the text and wrote up like the profile or the unit profile and stuff.
Yeah.
So fun. That's really cool.
Absolutely. And so a lot of what appears in that game comes from sort of a very collaborative, very sort of cooperative process, and that's like when I'm working with other people, that's how I like to try and set things up. Okay, I'll come up with these harebrained schemes, and but my first sort of port is to try and get enough. I try and make sure that anyone I'm going to be working with, that at least if we're working for the first 1-2 times together, they get paid for their labour at union rates up front. Okay, so if it's an artist, they'll get their work paid. If it's a layout person, if it's someone doing any part of the work, before I get a single penny out of things, they get theirs and at proper rates, not sort of mates rates. And then what we'd use is I'll use a crowdfunder usually is my sort of method, and I'll use that to both pay myself back for that up to that level, and then pay my rates, and then we split any profit after that based on some usually 50-50 if it's me and an artist, because the art is as important as me doing the rest, or depending on the sort of, we all agree the sort of balance of work involved beforehand. We agree how the profit's going to be split, and that's what we do, because it's no one person. It's not an auteur.
Yeah, we've struggled with that a lot, just trying to pay people so that nobody's working for free or on the promise of, well, if it does X, Y, and Z, you'll get paid. It's like, no, people have to eat. They have to get paid. Yeah. So I think it's hard. It's sometimes hard to figure out like what you could even make with RPGs. It's a luxury business that's very small. It's very niche. but there are dedicated fans. So it's not that no one can ever make any money. It's just really small amounts of money. But I do think paying workers is not just cool, but morally good. So I appreciate you breaking that down for us. And I love what you're saying about collaboration, because I do think, I mean, Chris, you do both, right? Art and writing. But when we've worked together and with other artists on the team and other creators, it's so fun to have that moment of like, I don't even know what this is. I just think it looks cool. It feels like part of your game, or I have this idea for the game, even though I'm not the writer. I think sometimes the roles can, mixing them up is the fun part. It is meant to be a different model. We're not big AAA video game studios where everyone has very specific briefs. So I think that's super cool to find out your game had more, more kinds of things in it, and you just didn't know.
Yeah.
Can you break down for us, Tanya, what's the for Lo Thy Dread Empire? What's the kind of what is the kind of overarching narrative? Like what are people getting into when they pick up this game?
So it's I describe it as a narrative war game and tactical role play game. Okay, so it sits in that sort of narrative war game space where you can sort of role play the characters or narrate the characterization a little more. And the sort of setting is that the capitalism has carried on and has destroyed all opposition to it. It's killed all opposition, and it's kept on going, and its need to consume has carried on to the point where it's starting to break down reality itself. There's death cults of capitalism. The nations are literally ruled over by demons. The gender and class are tearing at the fabric of reality and imposing their sort of sick hunts upon people. There's the police are undead who have are basically white supremacists, as in the undead whites who have came back and are working for the forces of capital.
With a G,
Whites.
right? For a podcast, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Got it.
That's
Yes.
very funny. This is the actual end of history.
Yeah, and ghoul clans of people who are so obsessed with the sort of that have been sold lifestyles that they can't maintain, to the point where all they can consume is the sort of flesh of others. They've become ghouls, and anything else just turns to ashes in their mouths. And so you've got these forces at play, and reality's breaking down. But because of the breakdown of reality, the sort of capitalism contains the seed of its own downfall. And reality breaks down to the point where the undead start to rise up. And that includes the undead who don't like capitalism, those that were killed. And so you've got anarcho-skeletal armies, rising, the One Bone Union rising from the grave. You've got you've got sort of witches and ghosts and the spirits of revolt as one faction coming into things. You've got the Mujeres Zombista, who are sort of feminist and queer zombie collectives who are sort of riding along on bikes and pedal bikes and carrying big axes and what have you. It's over the top. It's big, bombastic. There's a vampire faction who are on the side of the forces of collectivism and liberation. And they got up and they heard that these capitalists were all into blood and soil. And no, we're vampires. We need those things. Okay, and
those are the two things we have to have.
Yeah. So we've got to stop you. And the vampires are all in a federation of vampiric polycules. So they're all vampires that are in some way related through one giant polycule network of the blood.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, really, when you think about it, all the vampiric lineages, you could just argue that that's one long-lasting polycule where members just kind of come and go, cycle through.
Fluid bonded.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Oh my god, this is cracking me up.
Yeah, it's
It's
So
got
really
the
good.
dark humor, which
yeah, yeah,
as you can see
Yeah.
in that Games Workshop tradition of
yeah,
it's meant to be
yeah.
satire. In your case, it's very clearly,
Oh
there's
yeah.
the elements are all a little more
Well,
foregrounded of the
I,
anti-capitalist part.
I,
But
I give a
Right,
shout
right.
out to Games Workshop at one point in the
At
sort of
one
like
point.
well, no, it's a uh, like it's got the domains where the death cults of capitalism reside, and one of them I've put down as Nottingham. So they
Yeah, that
they
makes it.
they
I mean, they're worth
they
more than British Petroleum. They have to make it in as a villain, right?
you know, Revenge for Birmingham. If anyone out there knows Rogue Trader, they Games Workshop had a little pop at an industrial working class town. So let's take a
Yep.
little pop back.
Hey,
Uh,
I like it. I like it.
but yeah, the game itself is you sort of there's a way to like build your force. Is so you can build your own units, or you can use pre-gen ones that I've put in the book. There's 10 factions, so take your pick, and then you build the battlefield, and you can either do that with terrain and minis and all that sort of thing, or you can just draw it out. Like the game is set so it doesn't need distances, it doesn't need dice. It uses a sort of token exchange, like you're bidding power on different moves and you're secretly noting down orders and then revealing them at the same time. And you'll have like standing orders for units, and then if you want to change those, you've got to use you sort of send commands out, and that can cost more power, which is the power that you'd also be bidding with to try and overcome the enemy's plans. And so there's this sort of like very bidding auction-esque. It borrows from sort of ideas taken from like the board game Diplomacy and from the original Dune board game from the 70s. That kind of idea of the sort of like secret revealed plans, the secret bidding, really, and also the sort of from Diplomacy, that sort of direct, like there to there is happening. This is where there's a point of conflict, and now we resolve it. Those both play heavily in a lot of how I think about games. They were very influential back when I was at high school. I got to play. Played a lot of Risk, and then went on to play Diplomacy and a bit of Dune, and they've stuck with me. Lodged in my mind.
I love the secret bidding. I wanna use that more in games, and I'm
Yeah.
curious in playtesting how that's worked and some of the yeah, I guess like I'm curious how this plays out in practice, and how much. Maybe a simple question is just how much do you play test these games, and how do you play
Yeah.
test? Which again, it's very different than like reading like Chums and imagining playing that versus like Low Thy Dread Empire, where you're making your armies. But I don't know if you have a strategy or a set way you like to
Yeah.
sort of try out these mechanics and arrive at just the perfect one.
I'll go to some quiet corners of the internet where people don't realize who I am, and I'll just sort of like say I've got a game to run. I won't even say it's a playtest. Some of the like by the time I get it to a certain stage, I'll playtest with my local club or with friends. That's usually when I'm early on. I'll be like, this game's going to be rough. It's maybe not going to work. Let's give it a shot. And then yeah, and then I'll take it to like out into the wild a little bit myself and see how's it functioning. And that sometimes I go to a con, and so it's a little more me sat at the table, and that's a little more direct. But sometimes it's like I'll go into a one-shot Discord where people just run games, and I'll post a game, and I'll see if anyone likes the sound of it and give it a shot. And then depending on the game, it depends how much playtesting it needs. Low Thy Dread Empire had quite a wee bit. The Solstice, which also uses bidding mechanics, it's a folk horror game. It had lots of refinement, and I still feel like there's more to happen on that. I have released it. It's another one where it's like I released it in zine format, but I think it could be a far better game if it was on a deck of cards. I just have this feeling of like if I want to cross that bridge from sort of like I'm making zines which are very cheap to make and put out and count as books or books and magazines, and so you can just send them around the world and no one pays them too much heed. as soon as you sort of go into I'm making a deck of cards, it's like it's toys and games at that point.
Yeah. Which is really weird the U.S. Postal Service, you can't do media mail with cards, and that the
Mm,
harmonized tariff system, it's a different tariff code.
mm,
Even though, arguably, I mean, I guess because it arose with the idea of education, and books are educational, and all toys and games, regardless of what it is, aren't educational, which is obviously very silly. But I will say that it's cool, and I think reimagining things at the card scale, I have found personally very helpful. And like for example, with our game Blister Critters, having all
mm,
of the NPCs fit on one card meant we had to cut them a lot, which was
mhm.
really helpful because it's a game that's meant to model very quickly cartoon show kind of tropes and inspire people to come up with their own zany ideas. And it wasn't meant to have a very sketched out setting because it could be anywhere. It could be set in your hometown. So I actually think it was better that we moved them all to cards.
Mm.
But that was like a big decision to say no. All the NPCs will literally be cards, even if we print them in a book. We're going to show them as like magic card size cards.
Yeah,
So I think that's sometimes fun to give yourself the constraint too. It's just like fewer words, for one.
yeah. And
Um,
I just think for that game it will work a lot better. And it was one that I did. It actually was developed on like during lockdowns, and so was entirely online. And when I came to publish it, I just got out of being homeless, and I felt a little bit down about. Am I in a position where I can actually get making games again? And a good friend, um, a friend who's another game designer, I didn't have a PC. I was like scrambling for one, gave me one, and I'll be always grateful for that. And then I was like, right, I'm just going to, rather than keeping on banging my head against the wall with this, like Low Thy Dread Empire was behind on getting released. I was like, what I need to do is just put this out as a zine. If I just do this as a zine project, something well within my ability, put the bar of success down, take the pressure off a little bit, and get back in the saddle. And so that's what I did with it, and I think it worked really well. And that got the creative juices flowing again. So,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
Sometimes it's
great.
good to get out of your own way, and
hmm
just I think the thing that I always hear people say, and that I always say to myself when I'm writing or even working on an illustration is like don't let great be the enemy of good. Just get it out into the world. Just
hmm
see how people respond to it. See if people pick it up, and you can always fiddle with it again later. These are such
yeah,
mutable things that we're creating, and I think that there's that expectation that it is going to remain mutable and that there will be new additions and
hmm
all kinds of stuff, which is I think one of the beautiful things about creating tabletop games is that it's always going to be a collaborative process. There's always going to be back and forth. There's going to be play testing. There's going to be feedback from the
yeah,
community, and you can always change it. You can always make it
yeah,
better, which is
yeah,
nice.
definitely.
Yeah, I agree, and I think sometimes also the structure we've talked about this on the show, but I'm curious, Tanya, because you're a veteran of this as well. The structure of the crowd fund, even if it's for
Mm,
well, it doesn't matter the size of the project. It's like you have to
yeah,
do a certain thing on time, and
hmm
then at some point you have to send it to someone, and
yeah,
and people are generally pretty nice about it. They give you a lot of leeway, but it does give you the external deadlines of like, okay, I
hmm
have to run the campaign. I have to figure out, am I going to print something?
but
So it's interesting. I feel like I've seen a couple of years go through the cycles, and we should get to. It seems
oh
like you
yeah,
have a new project that's coming out soon on Kickstarter. People can go follow the Thunder Perfect Mind, which we should really. We could have a whole nother hour discussion of this. But
mm,
do you have any
let's
general thoughts before we turn to Thunder Perfect Mind on just sort of kickstarting and like
yeah.
that sort of cycle of like Chris is saying, getting feedback, that kind of interactivity?
Yeah, so I guess the things I've learned is do as much as you can before the Kickstarter launches. Also, the fact that I've managed, I do this as a hobbyist. I don't put food on the table with this. Okay, I the money I get as profit is nice. Like the money I get from freelance writing is nice. It bought me this sofa in the background, that kind of thing. Okay, but I don't rely on it, and so I come at things from a different angle from those that do. I think in a huge amount of respect to folks who do this as work. Okay, it is this definitely work for me, but also I'm in a bit of a different position. So I've managed to do this both while I've been um, unemployed and sort of dealing with homelessness. I've managed to do it through a bunch of other life stuff going on, and I carry on now from a position where I'm like, I'm careful about this because I kind of feel like if I did this as work, I would grow to not like it. If it was like dedicated work, I that might change in the future. I'll never say never. Like people change, life changes, but the crowdfunding side of it allows me to do it that way. Um, I'm very much in that sort of early Kickstarter mentality of I like Kickstarters where it's like somebody's got an idea and you're chucking them some money in the hope that that idea comes true. And a lot of the Kickstarters that are back nowadays don't fall into that camp. It's very much like a pre-order.
Yeah,
Getting,
definitely.
And that is, I think, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but it is fun to try to do it more for real. But that is a switch that is like, you can't go back. Like, you can't do something in a more lighthearted sense where it could or couldn't fail and doesn't matter when you're trying to not just pay your own bills, but also pay your team. And so to raise the amount involved, you sort of have to be like, it has to be really slick comparatively and sort of pre-ordery, which does suck because it is fun to just be like, I don't know, what if enough people like this idea, I'll write a couple pages. So I think there's like pros and cons, but maybe if you do enough of them again and you find enough sort of interest to distribution, even if it doesn't become full time, it just becomes more of a thing that for you is very much like getting your name out and getting you maybe some money. So well, to that end, let's talk about Thunder Perfect Mind and get you some word to say.
Let's get some
clarify.
backers.
I want more people to have my games. I don't want to make 100 of them. I want to make 10,000 of them.
Yes. No, 100%. So to that end, I do think, again, I've read Connection Machine, Mum Chums, Low the Edge of Empire. I'm really excited about Thunder Perfect Mind for a variety of reasons. For one, the title, I did not know this. I just saw it and said, what are these words? This is dead on for me. I love these words together. I don't know what it is. Here, take my money.
Okay.
But looking it up, it seems like this is a Gnostic poem.
Yes.
That is an actual poem out there you can read. So I'm very curious about how that interacts with sort of this dark modern fantasy sort of occult action thriller, as it says, TTRPG, and being a tethered aeon. So being sort of someone with supernatural powers, you're involved with the cult. There's a lot going on from just looking at just the first couple sentences of your Kickstarter and then thinking to my understanding of sort of Gnostic traditions and the sort of tensions between, esoteric Christianity that's not Gnostic, esoteric Christianity that is described as Gnostic, Mandaism, which is not Christianity. Obviously, then there's different sort of esoteric versions of Judaism and Islam. So I'm curious, what is this game? Yeah, what is this game? But I know Chris has thoughts too. But yeah, Tanya, why don't you just describe, first of all, what is the game we're talking about?
Yeah, so the game, you mentioned it, is you're playing tethered aeons. Now, that is people whose souls have came across some sort of higher wisdom, some sort of higher knowledge. They've learned something about the nature of reality, and they've sort of started to ascend beyond the reality we're tethered within. But they've died, and their worldly concerns, the sort of like their past life, their toxic nostalgia, their the esoteric mysteries they're caught up within, tether them to the world. And so they're you're basically and if you play it solo, it's just yourself. If you play it with others, you're forming a mystery cult with the sort of idea of trying to both put your past life to rest, deal with the mysteries that are before you, and sort of gain something through this sort of web of contradictions you find yourself in. And this sort of is inspired by the poem The Thunder Perfect Mind, which is sort of a almost 2,000-year-old poem where it proposes these different contrapositions and contradictions, and from a sort of position of power that is both strong and weak. And it sort of uses these sort of different positions to sort of bring about a sort of almost like a dialectic of what's happening. Sort of like you find a different way of doing things, a different way of understanding the world through the sort of inherent contradictions of the ideologies wherein being revealed. But the game doesn't say all that directly. It isn't even. It's definitely also inspired by sort of like the sort of occult action thrillers of basic, like cinema, things like The Killer, John Woo's The Killer, and The Prophecy, and Dark City, and that kind of dark, gothic, punk, like White Wolf type aesthetic for the World of Darkness. And it actually is also a reply to Kindred of the East in some ways, because that game, I when I was a teenager, I got it in someone was giving away a lot of games as they were moving house and downsizing, and they basically got me and a couple of other younger gamers to come round, and they were like, "These are the games I'm giving away," and I ended up with this game just in a box, and it's like this game intrigued me, and I wanted to. Over the years, I'd wanted to run it or do something with it, but it also put me off horrendously because it's so blatantly like racist and Orientalist. It's
Very
got
Orientalist, yeah. It's like White Wolf's, Oriental Adventures, like what
yeah.
Wizards put out for third edition D&D, where you're just like, oh, what the fuck, man? And like,
Why?
I see you're trying to like do an homage, but it just comes off as like this weird pastiche, and like, yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
And I was like, you could take some of the core ideas in there, the very sort of like idea of being tethered after dying, being tethered to your past life because of the tragic circumstances around it, but also striving for some sort of higher ascension. And I'm like, that's cool. That's a cool core concept. Why did you have to do all the other stuff with it? Why? And so again, this is going back to when I was like maybe my very late teens, early 20s, and very early 2000s, late 90s ish, and I'm sort of wrestling with that as something like I want to try, like I try like, because they do this whole mishmash of the East, smear so I was like, maybe if I focus in on one region and I do a culture there and I try and be really respectful, and the game still fought against me on that, just the way it's set up, the sort of terminology, and I tried taking it out of that context. I'd done all sorts of different things, and it was never happy, and I'd always just sort of put it away. Eventually I gave the book away, and I was just like, I can't deal with this. But this game takes some of the things that I love about that, the bits that I do actually love about Kindred of the East. Also, there was a good Asians Represent podcast episode where they read it. They were going to do multiple parts, but I guess they just didn't need to. Like, one part was enough to demolish it. Why put yourself through more of that?
Yeah, shout out to Daniel Kwan and co for doing all that hard work of unpacking.
Yeah, I was gonna say poor Daniel having to read through that shit.
Yeah, so those all these sorts of things came together. I've been reading this sort of like poetry, 2,000-year-old poetry that may or may not be Gnostic, but it has sort of like it was found in the Nag Hammadi library along with other Gnostic texts. I started reading some of the sort of Sethian canon, like Sethian texts that came out from the Nag Hammadi library, like translations of them, and I was just like, I was absolutely, like, it all clicked in my head. There was sort of like, almost like the contrary positions of the poem. I had this sort of like ascendant, wondrous sort of like bubble of that the poetry had put me into. And also there was this sort of like debased idea of, I can turn this into a roleplay game.
Well, that's so Gnostic in and of itself. It's like, oh, what do I need to do for my garment of flesh right now? It's like, oh, I need to make this into a role-playing game.
So that's pretty much what I made the game, and it kind of sat on Itch is a sort of like demo version. Although it was a very complete demo, and I wasn't even going to do Zine Quest this year. I decided I'll just leave it, and then events conspired that maybe I will do it. So yeah, here we
I
are.
love I love the segue of, well, events conspired. So that's so good.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you tell us, for folks who haven't downloaded it off of Itch and taken a look, how does the Thunder Perfect Mind play? Like, what do the
Yeah.
mechanics look like, and how have you kind of captured this, like, yeah, Gnostic dialectic
Yeah.
dualism in those mechanics?
So I've borrowed heavily from a few different places. The core place is actually a sort of a game called Houses of the Blooded. It's a big influence. It's a game that I've always really enjoyed since it came out, and I kind of loved the way in which in that game you'd sort of like get these big pools of dice and you'd take some aside, and then you'd roll the main pool, and if you got a certain target number, you could then add to use the dice you put aside for extra truths, for extra details about whether the roll is whether you isn't for winning, it's for if you succeed or fail, you get to say which way it is, and then you get to add dice for adding these sorts of details. So I took that idea and kind of married it with that storyteller system. So I've got these fistfuls of D10, and then I took the sort of Gnostic ideas and I made, rather than from Fate, the sort of like aspects idea, but I made dual aspects that are the sort of core dualities that the characters you play are caught within. So there's your life that you've left behind, that you've died and left, and then you've got your death, what you are now, like what you are within undead society, what you are to the powers that be, what you're striving to be now. You've got war and peace, sort of these two supernatural powers that flare up in you. You've got warlike, powerful, dominating powers, and you've got peaceful, connective powers that or sort of like that can sort of like war powers could be connective. Peace powers could also break things apart, but the balance between those shifts, and as you do your sort of more supernatural side, if you become unbalanced within them, becomes more apparent. And there's also like vision and oblivion, the sort of your higher purpose, your higher knowledge, the sort of knowledge that you're striving towards, and the sort of your darker instinct, your darker self that's sort of like trying to drag you back into worldly concern. And so having those as tides, when you're picking dice from them, you can only pick from one half of the balance. You can never pick from, like, you don't pick life and death and get both the dice pools. You can only pick one of them at a time, and it has different effects, and which ones you're picking has different effects as you go. And rather than having, if you remember, that storyteller system has like your social, mental, and physical traits, but then it's got lots of differentiation under them and lots of different. I was like, when I was trying to play Kindred of the East, okay, what was I actually looking for from those three stats? I wasn't looking for all that granular sort of superheroes with fangs. What I was really looking for was different from a game of Vampire the Masquerade, and was different from a game of Werewolf. What I was looking for in Kindred of the East was breakneck action. I was looking for interpersonal drama, and I was looking for an occult investigation. So I've just got those as your three core stats, and the way in which they play into things and the way in which you choose them can lead to your doom taking effect, and sort of doom building up, which happens within the rules as well. So you're gathering up these pools of 10-sided dice. You get a big fistful of d10s if it's a good day, and then you take a certain amount of them to one side. You roll sevens of hits. If you get the most hits out of anyone at the table, you get to say who succeeds and who fails at the whole table in the intent. Not just you, that's you saying for everyone. Like, you succeed, you fail, I fail. Okay? But then those dice that were put aside, as long as anyone else, as long as they get one hit, they keep all of them. And if they got no hits, they half the number. But then they get to use those on a one-to-one basis to add details about how the success or how the failure took place. So you've got a sort of almost like fail forwardy type mechanic almost, or you can use it to pile on success, pile on failure to change the whole direction of the story. So you've got the free flowing conversation. At some point, the dice mechanic is engaged by someone. You have this sort of like backward and forward of truths that are like definitive facts, one per die or one per thing, and then that shifts the story. It does a handbrake turn on everything, so it makes it a big event by forcing people into having to confront the truth and the sort of the contradictions that they see before them. Those breakneck action points, those interpersonal dramas.
No, I like that a lot. I like a little more detailed like tagging system with the sort of fiasco back and forth. You don't have total control and pooling.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to play this. I think it sounds like something that would be really fun to step through and feel the action shift and see how you're using dice to get it. As you said, that what is the deeper emotion I'm trying to do, and why not just make that the thing as opposed to everything simulating. Which again, I like adventure games that do this, but not every game has to simulate. How good am I at punching versus puzzle solving or something. You can actually simulate directly the actual part you want to make the game about.
And
so
one of the interesting things from playtesting, the very first playtest I had of this was we were playing playing with some really great people that design games as well, and they were like, I got this great bit of feedback. It went basically, oh, I really love it. I love the sort of over the top emotion of it all. I love the sort of angsty, almost teen feelings that it brings out in me. And I was like, oh yeah, brilliant, okay. And then they were like, yeah, but there's a lot of dice. There's a lot of dice. And I was like, yeah, there's, it's a lot of dice. And so, tell me more about this. And so they sort of described gathering up dice from one part of this character sheet, from another, and feeling like overwhelmed, almost like I've got so many dice. And then I was like, okay, tell me more about this, because they would try to explain to me, oh, we should maybe reduce it down to just one die from each area, and then that'll be a bit neater looking. I was like, yeah, it would be neater, it would, but how when I was digging into it, they were describing that it made them feel excited, it made them feel a little nervous about, and then they had to puzzle how many of these are they putting to one side, and not in a this is slowing the game down way, but in a sort of like, what do I actually want to get out of this? Like, this is a big moment, this feels big. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm wanting. So
yeah. I wish actually that I would stop referencing Games Workshop at this point. But Rick Priestley has a great book about writing war games that Tanya, you've probably read through before. But he talks about this like affective register of throwing buckets of dice, where it's just exciting. It feels good, and there's a physicality to it. I think to your point about feeling overwhelmed by it, especially with a big handful of D10s. It's not like those little tiny D6 you use in most war games. It's like it's a handful. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And I like that actually you're playing around with that affective register where it's like, no, you should feel overwhelmed. You should feel like this is an important choice that you are making, not just mechanically, but also narratively at the same time.
I remember playing Exalted first edition when it came out. It was very big at the games club I was going to at the time. There were a few folks
blew
there
up
that
when
really
it first
loved
came out.
Yeah, and before everyone started doing optimum builds and really digging into it, it had this sort of moment of like where you were gathering up all these tens and looking for your sevens, and so that was exciting. It was fun, and then it kind of broke down because they kept adding and one thing leads to another. It's White Wolf game. They've got to get a new edition out, and you can't have a new edition if your old one is working fine. So, and it's not done on purpose. It's just like that's how game design works. Like that's how game development works. Look at.
Sometimes you do have new ideas, but also when you have a company that size, they have to create interest in certain things. And
scale creep, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the same sort of idea that things change and things happen, and then you want maybe have another shot at it. So
Yeah, and also you're following, and we've never had this issue, but if you have that many thousands of people using your product,
Yeah.
you're kind of following them after a point.
Yeah.
So if it's
Yeah.
successful, it's actually an interesting seesaw to your idea of seesawing dynamics with dice. With marketing too, where people use your game in new ways, and you might have to say, how are they using it, and how do I respond? And sometimes they make bad decisions, like fourth edition D&D, and sometimes they make interesting decisions. But we'll find out. But so
we can talk about that sometime.
Yeah, we can talk about
Not
this.
today. Not today.
This is maybe not today, but I do just want to just say this really. It's really funny because like I remember when fourth edition D&D came out, and all the people that I played D&D with at the time revolted. They were like, this is horrible, we hate this game. And I played it a few times, I didn't get into it, but there's this funny thing where they're like, more recently in the last couple of years, I've been meeting more and more people who are champions of fourth edition D&D.
Yeah.
And I would be curious, maybe we can talk off air about what you like about it and what you don't, but I am really curious. I think maybe that's like a panel show we can have at some point. It's like,
yeah.
fourth edition D&D, good or bad? Go.
Relitigating mechanics from 20 years past.
Yeah.
Well, I think the more interesting thing would be to actually step through, even if not play full adventures, but of all these things like Fate, played a long time ago, fourth edition played a long time ago, and a lot of the Games Workshop things you guys have brought up, I've either only played as a kid or never played. So I think to some degree it's a question of like giving things a fair shot, or what can we learn from interesting failures. But what's not a failure is going to be the Thunder Perfect Mind, which sounds great. It sounds really interesting mechanically, and certainly the Gnostic kind of gloss or take on the setting, which isn't meant to. So Tanya, not to speak for you, but you could tell us it's not a real world. It's not meant to be a real religion. It's totally fantasy, but it's drawing on some inspiration from.
I've never said the characters and things in this are from Sethian Gnosticism. We are doing fantasy Sethian Gnosticism in the same way as I've just heavily taken heavy inspiration. Like if this were a true sort of like a basis for reality, what could this look like, and what could we use it to talk about, and how are we thinking about the world? And so I did get a sort of cultural consultant to come in and read over what it's doing, because I don't like Sethianism maybe isn't such a big active concern, but it's still something I want to get right in the text. I don't want to misrepresent something, or to have someone turn around and go, oh, why is this here? That just feels it breaks apart the sort of the fictional reality, the verisimilitude of the
right. And not that it's so much about, in this case, because it's arguably some of the themes you're talking about are not lived for most people on Earth, but it's more about. I just mean to say it's not a game about a particular religious framework per se. It's a fantasy game, but it's using, as you said, taking seriously some of these propositions, because that's an interesting way to build a world, and it does lead to these interesting questions about morality and one's place in the world. And I will say, just looking at the influences listed again on the Kickstarter, like I'm a huge fan of like Twin Peaks, Lost Highway. It's sort of hard for me to imagine exactly how fantastical that world would be, but I when I see Dark City, I feel like Dark City is such it's such a slept on movie, and I feel like this vibe, just the art, the way you're talking about taking seriously sort of an alter reality at this kind of cosmic, fantastic, horrific scale, does remind me of some of that filmmaking, that it has the edge of surrealism, but it's trying mental states and affective states in a different way. So I feel like this as a game might be an interesting way to sort of have that exchange, and it doesn't feel like a slasher horror game. It's not
it's a cult action thriller. I'm putting that right on the cover. It's
right on the
very
cover.
much in that. It's there. It's like, what are you getting into? Do you like occult action thrillers? Do you like these things? Get this game.
Right.
I know I'm getting big The Crow vibes as well. Including like being a revenant who is like tied to a very specific place because of a very specific trauma.
And it's weird that some people think it's weird I've not put that in the influences list, but honestly, Dark City was a bigger influence. I didn't think about The Crow till after. Like Dark City, that idea of like, you wake up, you don't know who you are. You're in this city that kind of is perpetually in the dark, or sort of it's dark brooding place, and there's these mysteries like who are who are these people that are controlling the place? Why does it change around about me? Why, like, what's Shell Beach all about? Like, this carries on. This is sort of like the sort of esoteric mystery, the cult mystery of it all. Definitely played its part.
Yeah, the idea of deeper levels. The Crow is very flat. It's very cartoony.
Yeah.
There's not a
Yes.
deeper level that matters. It's just the real world. But okay, one guy died and came back. It's a superhero movie. Whereas, yeah, Dark City or any of the Lynch movies, there's all. Even if you watch the whole thing 5 times, you can't totally agree on the deeper level. And I think that's the occult part. I would say recent one that's really good. Mandy with Nick Cage. Excellent action occult movie.
Mandy's good, yeah.
Maybe
Mandy's
not as
good.
deep.
Oh yeah, cool. But
I don't think it's quite
doesn't
as
have to
deep
be.
as Dark City, but it is
still good.
unhinged and
Unhinged.
very fun. It's very fun to watch.
I did put The Prophecy on the list of influences, so
Yeah, that's
I mean,
another fun one.
yeah.
It's really good.
Well, Tanya, we've been talking for an hour. I want to make sure you have the last word. Is there anything you wanted to bring up that we didn't get a chance to cover? Anything about your game design process, hopes for 2026, a solidarity with union workers? Maybe was one topic.
That's what I was just about to mention. So when I said events conspired, they were not good events. The reason here in the UK we do have a game workers union. It's a branch of the IWGB, and it's mainly video game workers. That's the big membership, but it does have tabletop workers within it. And what's happened this year is that Rockstar Games, makers of Grand Theft Auto, etc., and the cowboy game that puts a lot of effort into making sure a horse poos correctly, but women don't appear really.
Sorry. That's the best way I've ever heard that game described. Go on.
Yeah. So they took 32 of their employees who were organising within the union and sacked them without warning. Said that they were being sacked for gross misconduct, did not provide any evidence of this, did not undertake an investigation, did not involve in any way. They basically just called them into work and on the spot fired them, and then took all their security passes and marched them out the building. And it was obvious it happened weeks after the union had just reached the number of people, the percentage density of union membership where it would automatically gain recognition within the workplace in the UK. So it is blatant union busting, and I decided I'll be putting some of the profits that I make from this game as a personal donation into the fighting fund for that. So there's a link that I'll pass on to you all where other people can do the same. Make some donations, help the fighting fund. The folks who've been sacked haven't been given interim relief by the courts, which would mean that until the case is heard, that they'd keep getting paid. It's a very high bar to get that in the UK. It's very rare for it to go through for groups of people. So, but it's left people in a really, really bad position, and they are going to win. They're going to win at the end of this. At least that's where I'm keeping my mindset at the moment. And yes, I'm doing that, and I'm going to be helping run a convention in Glasgow in March, which is going to be a playtest focused mini convention called Groundhog
awesome.
Play. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my god.
So it's going to be a 2-day convention where people can sign up. It'll be all playtests. There's no published games there, and basically you play your game day one, you run it. There's going to be an iteration station, sort of a co-working space. There's going to be, on the second day, at the start of the day, there'll be a Dear Designer event where we all sit in a room together, and you can stand up and ask a question or propose something we discussed for 5 minutes. And then we have 5 minutes on that topic, and then everyone gets to say their Dear Designer, sort of like an agony aunt type piece. But then the second day you can run your game a second time, having iterated it, and see how it runs the second time. So thus Groundhog Day, Groundhog Play.
That's very good.
Yeah.
I like that. Dear designer, it's me,
Yeah.
Margaret.
Yeah.
That sounds
Dear
great.
designers.
I'd love to do like a rapid iteration with people, because it's one thing to do rapid iteration when you're like on your own and you're like, I had a aha moment. Who do I tell? The cat. But it'd be different to like immediately go back to the same folks and be like, okay, let's work through this. So that sounds really fun. Wish we were in the UK for so many reasons right now, but we're not. So have fun, and please let us know. We'll signal boost. Just please shout us out. And
I was going to say, if you have a website or any links for that, just let us know, and we'll make sure for you and for the folks listening at home. We'll have links for for the Rockstar Games workers, for the IWGB fund, as well as for Groundhog Play, for sure.
Yeah. So with that, we covered, so everyone go check out Thunder Perfect Mind and support union workers, and we'll have links for this. Chris, do you want to ask traditional closing question?
Oh my God, I would love to. I've been waiting so long. No, I'm just kidding. Last question, our traditional closing questions. Tanya, where can people find you online? Where can they pick up your games? And how can we best support you going into 2026?
So, you can find me on Blue Sky. Just look for floaker.bsky.social. You can find me on itch, floaker.itch.io. And the best way to support me is take a look at on Kickstarter, look up the Thunder Perfect Mind, follow that project, help it get it out into the world.
Already followed.
Awesome. Already followed. Everyone check out all of Tanya Floaker's great games, including the upcoming Thunder Perfect Mind. And in the meantime, this has been Why We Roll, the tabletop game design podcast of Stillfleet Studio. And we'll be back. And maybe in the future we will play Thunder Perfect buckets of D10s. And you'll watch us count D10s on our desks as we're like, wait a second.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and stay warm if you're in the Northeast. And fuck ice.
Jeez. Yeah, fuck ice. Fuck
Literal
12,
ice.
Fuck ice.
Metaphorical ice.
And
Fuck them both.
Yep.
All right, y'all. Bye-bye.
Good night.